Hey everybody, welcome to the Patty G Show. I'm your host, Patty G. We are back for another amazing episode this week. We've got a restaurateur, consultant, executive chef, and author, Peter Sclafani himself in the studio. We're going to learn about all the concepts he's been a part of, developing, get into some tech side of things, and just also happenstance stories where you just figure out how to do things and opportunities arise and you take advantage of them and make the best out of them. But before we get to that, I want to give a big, wonderful shout out and thank you to the amazing folks that bring you the show each and every week. Building 5, Mimosa Handcrafted Jewelry, Falaya Real Estate, Lake Men's Health Center, Horizon Financial, Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge, Currency Bank, the bank for business owners, and you know our outfits are always brought to you by McClavey Limited. Without further ado, Peter, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad we're able to make this happen and get you on this show. And I've known about you for a while, visited many of your restaurants, been patroning them for quite some time now, and it's an honor to sit down and actually talk with you about how you got involved in everything.
Well, great. I love sharing my story, so happy to do it.
Well, for those that may not be aware of who you are you and what the heck do you do?
So I'm a third-generation chef and restaurateur out of New Orleans. So born and raised there. My grandfather was in the restaurant business. My dad was in the restaurant business, so I kind of grew up there. My brother and I worked together in the business, and we had an unfortunate incident. My mom passed away unexpectedly, and it kind of put the family in a tailspin. I was already out of college. My parents wanted me to get a quote-unquote real job.
What do they define as a real job?
Well, you know, just the restaurant business, it's always been thought of as so hard, so difficult to raise a family. And so I went to LSU. I got a degree in finance. I was planning on going to law school, but while I was there, I realized my passion was the restaurant business. I loved everything about it. And it was right at that time. I graduated high school in 86 and LSU in 1990. So in that time is when chefs were starting to shift. You were getting to see the celebrity chef. Wolfgang Puck had just done these little pizzas at Spago, you know, and people were watching Julia Child and Justin Wilson on TV, and Paul Prudhomme had just released his, you know, that landmark cookbook and had done Black and Redfish right at that time. And so people were starting to know who the chef was, because before then, no one knew who the chef was at the restaurant. It wasn't a thing, and people started doing that. And I'm like, you know, maybe this is what I do, because you know, I got good grades and things like that, but I knew I was never going to be the top lawyer. I was not going to graduate first in my class in law school. I'd probably be middle of the pack. But I thought, if I go into the restaurant business, I got a chance of being up there at the top. Yeah. So let's do that. So I did that. Most of my career before that was front of the house. Everybody starts dishwashing, and I started standing on milk crates when I was like 6 years old, washing dishes in a 3-compartment sink, and, you know, worked busboy, waiter, bartender, manager, all in the front. And then after college, started in the kitchen and really, you know, threw myself in that. But then my mom passes away unexpectedly. We had a restaurant in New Orleans East, and we had done a deal for a restaurant in a hotel in the French Quarter. It was in the Chateau Lemoyne Hotel. And it just, you know, my mom was such a big part of what we did. It was difficult. And my dad was, you know, everybody was struggling with it. My dad was like, we're going to close the French Quarter restaurant. We're going to just consolidate. And I'm like, I don't want to be in New Orleans East anymore. The area is not getting any better. I've got to think about, you know, myself and my family. And at that time, I saw an ad in the paper. So back in those days, people
put ads.
They put ads in the classifieds, and you had to check your ad to make sure it was in the right section. So I was checking my employment ad, and I saw this other ad, and it said the LSU football coach is looking to do a New Orleans Italian restaurant. and I would tell my wife, they are looking for me. I graduated from LSU. I'm a New Orleans Italian chef and restaurateur. And my wife says, you ought to just apply. And that way you can like tell your dad, hey, chill out, or I may go do something else. So I send my resume in. Back then it was fax. So you send it in and I get a call back. And I didn't know who TJ Moran was. But my wife's like, you ought to go just talk to him. So I come up to Baton Rouge and talk to him and realize, wait, TJ Moran, he's like the Brennans in Baton Rouge. And I wasn't really going to consider it seriously, but then I'm like, wait, this is a great opportunity. So my wife and I decide we're going to leave the family business, and we had our son was 1 year old, just turned 1.
So y'all are a young family.
And then we're going to move to Baton Rouge. And so the restaurant was Donardo's. I was the opening chef, and Ruffin Rodrigue was the front of the house manager. And I don't know if you remember back then, because you're kind of young, but Jerry started losing immediately as soon as we opened. People don't take kindly in Baton Rouge when the football coach is not winning, and they think he's distracted by doing restaurants and commercials and those kind of things. So, it wasn't good. After a couple of years, Jerry was not the coach anymore. And then he decided he'd go coach in this new league called the XFL. And so when he left, Ruffin and I were able to buy his portion. So he owned 20%. We bought 10% each. TJ wouldn't finance for us. He made us go to a bank and borrow the money, and we better produce enough money to get a distribution to cover our note. So it was not an easy
so
task
you wouldn't even
for
let
us.
The restaurant take on the debt?
We had to take on the debt personally.
Okay.
So it was challenging, and I learned a lot, and he taught me so much, but he taught it in the most difficult way. So he would be like, I hope you're making friends with your banker. You better like take your banker to lunch once a month or something. Well, we're like, the banker doesn't want to go meet with us. What are we doing? And like, there was a couple of times where we didn't make enough money to get a distribution. And I'm telling him, man, we're going to go broke, buying a piece of a restaurant. I didn't realize what like golden handcuffs were at the time, but I was paying money to work in a restaurant. It was, at the time, it didn't seem like the smartest thing, but, we met because I went to TJ thinking he's going to lend me the money, and because we can't make the note. And he's like, no, have you been talking to your banker? He's like, you better take your banker out to lunch. And so I didn't realize we're not the first guys who ever couldn't pay a note. And, we learned those relationships are really important, and that helped us out. We got through that little rough patch. We paid TJ off. And then it was kind of funny because it was a joke where we're standing in the pizza bar area at Ruffino's, and the news is on the TV, and there's a story about the capital gains tax rates going up. And TJ's like, I'm doing some estate planning. I'm going to take a lot of my real estate and move it into a real estate trust for my family. Too bad you guys don't buy this property. This would be a great investment property for you. But he said it with like a snicker because he knew we worked for him.
Right.
So we didn't have any money. And I'm like, I would love the opportunity. So we went to the bank that we were doing business
I hope
with.
you go to the bank you were taking to lunch.
Yeah. So we went to the bank, and I was up front with them right away. Like, I don't have any money. I just want you to know that going in. And they're like, yeah, everybody says that. I'm like, no, really, I don't have any money. But he looks at, they had our financials, but he went and reviewed the financials, and he's like, yeah, this cash flows, we can do it. And I was shocked, and I think TJ was shocked that somebody would lend two knuckleheads like me and Ruffin Rodrigue some money.
The CYA 360 Business Leader Symposium returns to Baton Rouge in October. This all-day event focuses on the main threats to your business. Speakers will present on fiduciary duties, brand building, insurance strategies, cybersecurity, exit strategies, financial confidence, and executive wellness. Jay Johnson, coach of the national champ LSU baseball team, will deliver the keynote address. Join us for the 2023 Business Leader Symposium, October 5th at the Renaissance. For tickets, go to CYA360.com. That's CYA360.com.
Isn't that a fascinating concept that often is missed? Where if you're going to be the landlord for a restaurant building, the bank cares more about what the restaurant does than what you do. Because ultimately, if that's the tenant, they want to make sure that restaurant's going to pay, because that restaurant in turn is paying the landlord to then pay the note. Right. So it's like, well, we don't care what you do, but what's your restaurant doing?
And so it was interesting because the deal at the time was just for the property. And so we start doing the deal, and I never thought the deal would go through, but we had so many people who helped us along the way. A lot of people mentored us, Todd Graves being one, and Matt McKay from All Star being another. Just really good friends, gave us great advice, just doing things like making a couple of phone calls for us that helped so much. But they told us we needed a really good attorney. They got us this attorney, and that was part of that was the key. A week before closing on the property, TJ comes to us and says, I am not going to be the operator if you're the landlord. You've got to buy the operating company as well. And he's like, I know you're not going to be able to get the money, so I'll owner finance it for you. Well, Ruffin and I were just doing backflips. We were so excited. Did I mention we were knuckleheads? Because we didn't do any due diligence.
Right.
We didn't put pen to paper to see if we could afford that. We were just so excited about the opportunity.
So, and to put some perspective, how old were y'all at the time?
In our probably early 30s, maybe.
Okay.
Mid-30s, somewhere.
So still very much considered extreme knuckleheads.
Extreme knuckleheads, yeah.
Property and a restaurant.
And, I mean, the total deal was going to be about $4 million. That's a lot of
That's a whole lot of money
for a restaurant. If we would have done our due diligence, we probably would have seen, wait, I don't know that we can cash flow all of that.
Right.
So we do the deal, and again TJ tried to change the terms of the deal the day of closing, and I had freaked out. I was losing my mind. My wife was a teacher at the time, and so I had to call the school and pull her out of class to come to the phone and say, I don't think the deal's going to work, and I'm probably not going to have a job after today because I'm not staying here. And she was so supportive. She's like, whatever, if we have to go sleep on somebody's couch, whatever we have to do, we'll do it. But this is your time, so go do whatever you have to do, and you have my complete support. And I was losing my mind, and Ruffin thought, why don't we call Matt McKay, because he's been helping us so much. And so I called Matt, and I just rant and raved about how mad I was. And he's like, you go into that office and you go exactly what you told me with the same passion. You go tell TJ. And he's like, then you shut up. The next one who speaks loses. So I did that. I went into TJ's office, and he had two chairs in front of his desk, and I pushed one out of the way, and I put that one chair in the middle, and I basically went and kind of told him off about how we've been working our asses off and making him all this money and doing this thing, and we're paying full price, and now he's gonna, I didn't realize the term was called the jam at closing. Now you're gonna jam me at closing. And I just went off, and then I stopped, and there was the silence was so awkward, but he spoke first. He went back to the original deal, and I called my attorney. I'm like, we had to change one or two things. Can you change that? Send it over. And then I just took my chair and turned it sideways and faced the wall so I wouldn't look at them because I'm like, we're not going to speak until the contract, until the contract gets here and we sign it, you know. And then Ruffin, being such a jokester, he's just, you know, we're just all standing there in silence. He's like, how about them Tigers, you know? But we got the deal signed. And then to make matters worse, as soon as we walk out of the office, TJ called the bank and pulled all the money out. He said the cash was his. So we go to operate our first day and have no money in the bank. So it was very challenging. And because we had such great relationships with all our vendors, everybody worked with us, allowed us to extend our payments and do that. And it looked like we were going to make it. Well, right away, I mean, within the first month, now I take over all the admin stuff, because before the office paid all the bills. So I had to pay all the bills and do all the bank recs and do all that, in addition to being the chef of the restaurant. And all of a sudden I realized, wait a second, we're not going to make it. We don't produce enough money to pay both notes. We definitely could have cash flowed the first one, but now that we got the second one, I don't know, you know, and I'm like, we're in bad shape. I don't know how we're going to get out of this. And so Ruffin called his good friend, Todd Graves, I think to ask him to lend us some money. But instead, Todd says, look, I have this consultant. She can help you. And I'm like, we can't afford a consultant. Like, we need money. We need to figure out how we're going to pay these notes. Like, I can maybe get by month one, but month two, we're going to be out of money. But Todd's like, if she doesn't make you 10 times what it cost, I'll pay for the consultant. So it was like
it's pretty good deal.
Pretty good deal. So we brought this consultant, Kathleen Wood, in, and she had worked with Todd when Todd first started, and she became the president of his company. I think she got out around unit 80 or something. Then she worked with Jack and Brandon at Walk-Ons as well. And so we bring Kathleen in, and she puts these whiteboards all up over this room, and she's just asking us questions and just going a mile a minute. And I can't figure out where she's going with this. And she was asking questions that I thought I knew the answer to until I had to say it. So she's like, so Peter, what's your food style? And I started to say, well, I serve local. I'm like, well, no, not everything's local. And we serve seasonal. I'm like, no, I serve asparagus year round and tomatoes year round. And I'm bringing salmon in from here, and I'm doing this from there. And she was stumping us, and she was asking us questions about the kinds of employees we had and, you know, how we'd rank them. And I wasn't getting any of it. And we had just gone for hours, and all the walls are filled with writing. And we finally take our first break, and she's like, I want y'all to think about this for the next 10 minutes while you're on break. There's a word here that kind of defines the company, and I want you to think about what it is. So we go off and take our break, and I come back first, and I sit down, and she's like, well, did you think about the word? I'm like, yeah. The word's passion. And she's like, not the word I was thinking for you. I'm like, oh, you even got that wrong. And then
I don't know how to define my own company at this point.
Ruffin comes in 1 minute later, and he busts through the doors, and he's like, I've got it. The word's passion. And she's like, well, your word's passion because I've never had two people say the same word. So that's your word. And as that started to marinate a little bit, everything started to come together for us. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got my cooking style. We serve food with a story. And she's like, Peter, that's exactly right. That's what you do. It's food with a story. And then, you know, I'm like, you had asked me who my top 5 servers were, and I mentioned them, and you said, well, what do they have in common? And I couldn't think of anything they had in common. But I figured it out. They have passion.
This episode is proudly presented by Gage. Gage is a local company here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. For over 40 years, Gage has provided businesses with the very best telecommunications, IT, and standby power services available. Gage has a variety of services, including Gage Cloud Voice. It is the last phone system your business will ever need. You need to give your business the ability to be accessible anytime, anywhere, and with Gage's cloud-based phone system, you'll be able to accomplish just that. Not only do they have Gage Cloud Voice, they have fully managed IT services that are proactive network monitoring, 24/7, 365, help desk, business continuity. They are there for you. What you're also going to need is some cybersecurity. Gage is there to safeguard your business from potential cyber threats, even when you aren't aware they exist. Gage also is power and leaders in standby generators. They are the #1 Cummins dealer on the Gulf Coast and provide generators to homes and businesses of any size so you can keep life going. Gage, better connected, a proud sponsor of the Patty G Show.
One of them is a professional snowboarder who lives in Baton Rouge. Like, how do you get, advertisers and sponsors when you're in Baton Rouge? Like, you've just got this tremendous passion. And one of the guys knew like everything there was to know about every kind of gun and gun manufacturers. And like, it was passion that they had. And so we left that meeting with Kathleen, and we had about 200 things we had to do, but the top 2 were food with the story and people with passion. And then that became our vision and our mantra, and that's what we did. And we were supposed to change the menu, and we were supposed to do all these things, but what we did from day one is we started telling the story of all our food, where it came from, how we got it, who the producer was, where the recipe came from. And now, instead of hiring somebody with experience, we'd ask different questions. So we're like, have you ever won a championship? Were you ever first place at anything? And it didn't matter what it was.
Yeah.
But those people who were like winners, who did those things, they had passion about whatever they did. And so we started asking just those couple of different questions. We started hiring different people, and we told the story of our food, and our business grew almost 50% overnight. And so Todd was right. We hired Kathleen. She got us focused on the right things, and our business blew up. And TJ was so mad because we were supposed to go broke. That's what was supposed to happen. And we didn't. And all of a sudden we start making money, and we can pay the note, and the restaurant's doing better than ever. And then we decide at some point, hey, it's time to grow. Ruffin's like, I'd like to go to Lafayette. So we get a real estate agent. We go look all over Lafayette. We don't find anything that we like. There's not a lot available, but we don't see anything that's available that we like. And the agent's like, let's go have a drink at this place called Cochon. And we walk in there, and we're like, oh my God, too bad this place isn't for sale. It's amazing. Like, it's on the river in River Ranch, and it's just a beautiful building. 3 days later, I get a call, and he's like, hey, I'm kind of the money guy behind Cochon. I heard y'all are looking for a restaurant in Lafayette. And I'm like, I heard Cochon cost y'all $10 million, and I don't know how to repay $10 million. He's like, everybody says that. That's not true.
You're like, I just figured out how to repay 4. I don't want to double it, 2.5x what I just finished.
Right, yeah. And we were
figuring out how to pay it off.
And we were not paid the other one. We were able to make the notes.
Right.
And they worked with us. They did the deal with us. I was sort of embarrassed to go back to the bank and ask for more money. But we did. They said yes, and we were able to do Lafayette. Then eventually we did Delaron Hall too. So we did a catering place, had an office. But then, like a lot of relationships, we've been together for so long. It was 20 years. We were just kind of going in different directions. We had different things we wanted. So, Ruffin basically said, look, the restaurant's kind of named after me. We called it Ruffino's. How about I buy you out? And I'm like, all right, that'll work. So it took longer than I thought, but we were able to reach an agreement, and he bought me out. Now, part of the buyout was there's a non-compete, non-solicitation. So it just sort of put me back a little bit, and then waiting for the money to come in for me to go invest. So I started consulting, because before I did the consulting, I was just at home. I stopped reading books. I didn't really have any goals. I was just in limbo and just waiting. And it was terrible. I gained a bunch of weight because I'm sitting on the couch. I watched like all of Netflix. It was terrible. And I feel like I was kind of getting depressed. And I told my wife one day, I'm like, oh my God, this is what poor people do. They have no goal. They're not making themselves better. They're not doing anything. I'm sitting on the couch all day watching TV. I have to go do something. This is awful. I've never felt this bad. And so I just friends who were like, hey, can you come do what you did for Ruffino's for us? And so, went to a couple of them, and I thought it was going to be easy because I'm an investor in this restaurant tech company that does sort of back of the house systems. And that's what all restaurants need. I think all businesses need systems, just like that book by Michael Gerber, The E-Myth Revisited. Like, you have to think like these big businesses. You have to create standards and systems for everything. And so that's what I figured I'd do. It was low-hanging fruit. We'll go into restaurants and I'll help them get these systems set up. And while I'm there, I get to see, can I bring anything to the company that can make it better? Can I take it from where it is and elevate it? So the first company that worked out for me was Phil's Oyster Bar. So, was able to go in there, set a plan for him. I'm going to tell you, I don't think Anthony was buying it completely. First, he's like, why are you coming here? Like, you do these fancy restaurants and things. You're this fancy chef, cooked at the Beard House, wrote a cookbook and did all this stuff. What about Phil's? And I'm like, Phil's is the exact kind of restaurant I grew up in. Like, it's exactly the same. This was where my roots were when my dad started on his own. I'm like, I feel like I'm at home here. So we laid out the plan, and a lot of people do this when I come on board. They give me complete carte blanche to do everything. And they're like, we can change the name, we can change. And I'm like, why would we do that? Like, and I told them, I need to get in here. I need to really understand what Phil's is about. Because otherwise, let's just call it Peter's. Right. Like, let's not call it Phil's. I've got to understand what it was about Gus Piazza that makes this so special.
Thank you so very much to Building 5 for becoming the latest sponsor of the Patty G Show. We are going to be filming once a month at Building 5. We're going to post about it on our social so you can come and visit with us. Building 5 is an excellent food establishment if you're into sharing boards and really getting a creative menu. Misty and Brumby have done an excellent job of creating an environment that's warm, welcoming, and inviting for every single occasion. Go on over to Building 5 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and tell them that the Patty G Show sent you.
So it did. It took me some time to go in there, to meet all the regulars who've been going since Phil's was on Government Street, to really get a feeling for what it was that made specials. And I could read the stuff like on Tiger Droppings, oh, Peter's here now, the prices are going to double. And, like, that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to keep Phil's. But I knew a few things to be true. One, it's quality. And TJ taught me this. Value is not a number. It's a feeling. Right? So he's the big Ruth's Chris guy. Ruth's Chris is not an inexpensive restaurant, but you ever try to go eat there? It's packed.
Always.
You can't get in. Always.
Lunch and dinner.
It's a great value. It's not about what a steak costs. It's about how you feel about paying for that steak. And so I had to try to explain that to them, because I think the mistake most restaurants make is when things get tight, they want to cut cost. And I don't think you cost cut your way to prosperity. It's the opposite. And sometimes it seems counterintuitive. Like, no, we got to save money. We're going to go broke. But guess no. And as a consultant, what I would tell them is, you know what would cost more than buying Louisiana crawfish or Louisiana shrimp or fresh fish? It's an empty seat. And whenever people tell me, oh, nobody can tell the difference, I'm like, you see those empty seats? They tell the difference. That's what it is. So it took a lot for them to believe in me enough, because I'm like, we're going to change the product and we're not going to change the price yet. And they're like, we're just going to go broke. But we didn't go broke. We just, Phil's, and just about every restaurant I work with, they're not broken. They need these dials turned 1 or 2 notches. And it's like, let's up the quality of what we're buying. Let's not buy the cheapest thing anymore. Let's not hire the cheapest people anymore. Let's make it better. Let's turn the quality up. And I mean, as soon as we started just turning these dials a little bit, the sales started going up. And then we brought in some other people. So I use a company called X Design, who does some marketing and design work for us. And they started with me as soon as we bought Ruffino's. Because as soon as you buy a company, anybody who's ever sold advertising comes out of the woodwork. And then I didn't know what to do. So everybody trying to sell me advertising, I'm like, if I used an agency, give me your top 3. And X Design showed up on a lot of those. And so we started working with Hunter Torito at X Design. I think he was just like an intern or something at the time, but now he's the principal there. So he kind of grew. We sort of grew together, and he gets restaurants. He gets branding. He's the same way. Like, I wanted to find out what Phil's was. He wanted to do the same thing. So we worked on just a couple of little branding items, and we worked on this new menu, and we kept Phil's mostly the same, and we added just a few new things. And the day the menu came out and the press release was released and it got picked up in just a couple of places, the business took off. And I had plans. We were going to hire some new staff. We were going to do this big staff training. I never got to it. But the fact that we got so busy so fast, the biggest comment we got is, oh my God, your service is so good. And we're like, we didn't even work on the service yet. But because we were busy, it made the service better. And then Anthony, besides being just a great person, he's really an outstanding restaurant operator and really gets it, and he just does a great job.
Oh yeah. I mean, isn't that a fascinating point within restaurants? The busier you are, oftentimes the better service you get.
Absolutely. You always get bad service when you're slow.
Oh yeah.
It's terrible.
And then it's when you feel like you're walking into a restaurant saying, oh, this is slammed, it's going to be terrible. You're like, wow, that server really stepped up and was just on the ball every single time. And
so that's what we try to do is, create these busy restaurants. So I'll lead into that in just a second, because then another friend came to me, was checking out what was happening with Phil's, Kiva Gidros, and he had Portobello's, and he's like, hey, are you interested in helping with Portobello's? I'm like, yeah, I can help you with some systems. And, so I start consulting with him a little bit, and then say, man, I think I can help with Portobello's. So we do a deal where I'm going to buy into half of the company. And we did that deal January 1st of 2020.
Okay.
2 months before COVID.
So prime time
To
to buy half a restaurant.
Mm-hmm. So had several Portobello's restaurants and P-Beau's in Denham Springs. So buy that, and then COVID happens, and we were planning on doing a remodel for Portobello's. We were going to start with the Bocage location because that was the oldest one, and so we got a line of credit, and then COVID happens, and you shut down. And restaurants work on cash flow,
Right.
so you end your payroll week. The paychecks come out a week later. You need the sales from that week to pay the payroll. Well, when you just shut down and the sales stop, there's not the money to pay the payroll. So we use the line of credit, and we're like, I'm sure they're going to do something and we'll be able to get our money back. Well, no, if you had any funds, you couldn't get repaid on that. So we kind of blew our line of credit. I'm not regretting it because you always take care of your people first, but we took care of our people, but then we were out of money to do the remodel. But now we're kind of forced to close. And so I'm like, well, I don't want to sit. I've sat at home on the couch before. Don't want to do that. So we just went into Portobello's Bocage every day, and my wife came with me, and we resanded all the tables and revarnished them, and we repainted, and we pulled all the equipment out and cleaned it, and just did our own remodel on a shoestring. So when it was time for restaurants to kind of reopen, we were able to kind of come back with a new restaurant at Portobello's Bocage. And it worked, and the business doubled, and it was, things were good, but you were still restricted. There were still all the things with COVID going on. And then we get an opportunity. Donnie Jarrow, who's the landlord at Phil's, but had seen what had been going on at Bocage, is like, hey, I had a couple of properties that opened up because of COVID. They're, we're still in it, but we're about to come out. What do you want to take a look at them? So he went and showed us a few properties. And when I saw the Rum House property, I'm like, this is it. This is the one. So we, in COVID, we decided we'd do a deal to take over the Rum House.
Welcome to the brand new Falaya mobile app. We took all the same tech that's helped hundreds of people sell their homes themselves and packed it into an easy-to-use app for your phone. When you download the Falaya mobile app on either the Apple or Android App Store, you'll immediately be able to see the power of this game-changing tool. From the seller's dashboard, you can navigate to all the information that you need. We intentionally separated everything into key groups, such as tasks to be completed, buyer leads for your listing, and contact information for everyone involved through closing. When you get an offer on your property, you can simply review and respond all within the app. No matter where you are in the world, you'll be able to monitor everything that's going on with your property from listed to sold. It's truly the power of Falaya in the palm of your hand. Download the app and see for yourself. Falaya, it's real estate reimagined.
Well, I didn't think financing was going to be a problem, but because of COVID and because restaurants were singled out by the government during COVID, no one would lend to anything that had to be repaid by restaurant funds.
Yeah.
So that became really, really challenging. But we did, I had an idea of what we wanted to do, and we started with the place. And I knew we wanted to become like Instagrammable. So my daughter in her early 20s started telling me after we redid the Portobello's Bocage location, she's like, Dad, your restaurant's kind of becoming cool. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? How do you know? She's like, well, if my friends go there and they want to tag themselves there, that's how you know your restaurants are cool. And so I'm like, so what are some other cool restaurants? So she starts going through her phone and she's showing me things, and she's like, oh, look, this is Soji. And I'm like, I've been to Soji. I've never seen this. She's like, oh, it's in the women's room. Like, people go in the bathroom and take, and I'm like, the bath, like, I'm a guy. If you pull your phone out in the men's room, like, that's trouble. That's
People
not,
gonna start looking at you like, hey, hang on, Pete, put it away.
So, you know, I wasn't used to that, but she showed me other places like Auction House in New Orleans and places like that were, you know, cool because people went to go take photos there. So I knew we kind of wanted to do that there. And so we had Hunter come over, and I'm like, well, we need somebody to help us with design and architecture. And he's like, well, one of my people, I think their husband works for this place called Dyke Nelson Architects, DNA Workshop. So Dyke comes over to have a first meeting with us, and I do the same thing I do with like the bank. Just want to let you know, I don't have any money. Like, really, I don't have any money. And he's like, yeah, we can work with that. And I start to tell him that I want to do some, you know, I tell him the story about my daughter and being cool. And he's like, oh, well, we did Soji's design. And I'm like, well, great. He's like, but your bathrooms here don't work. Like, you can't do that here because the thing of taking a photo in a bathroom is you're not supposed to be able to tell it's a bathroom. And wherever you take a photo, you can see a sink or a stall or something. So it doesn't work. So we were going to do, we're going to find someplace else to take photos. And I want to go back for a second to something that happened to us at Cochon. So when we take over Cochon and we're like, look, this was Donald Link's restaurant. I mean, Donald Link's like a culinary god in Louisiana. And he's selling Cochon. So everybody knows Lafayette's like this tough, fickle market, but he's from the area and serves that kind of food. So when we're talking and doing the deal, I'm like, so Donald, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently? And so he gave me a list. I just wrote it down, and he's like, the front door is in the wrong spot. We wanted the door on the river because we're on the Vermilion River. But when you pull in the parking lot, you can't see where the front door is. And it really irritated people. He's like, and then we're Cochon, so we did all this pork, but people kept asking us for steak. And we were doing French wines, and they want California cabs. And, you know, we're doing all these little small batch bourbons, and they want Crown Royal. And I'm like, well, at Ruffino's, we do California cabs. We do steaks, our number one item. We sell a bunch of Crown Royal. Like this all works in our favor. And then we got an architect, and I'm like, we need to I want to move the front door. I want it to face the parking lot. And there was an emergency exit. So I'm like, there's already a penetration. Let's put the door there. It's not like I'm some kind of genius. There was a hole in the wall. And I'm like, why don't we just make that hole bigger? It just happened to be like the perfect spot for the door. And when you walked in, you now walked in past the pizza bar. I mean, they already had a wood burning brick oven, so didn't have to do that. It all just worked out perfectly. But now you came in and you could see the river, and we were able to expand. Like, we could look and see, well, that's not a support wall, so let's take this down, let's open it up. And we did a few of those things, and people would just come in, and it almost looked like a different restaurant, even though we didn't change that many things. But we just asked, what would you do different? So when we're taking over the Rum House, I decide we'll do the same thing. Let's see if we can find some of the managers who used to work here. So we found some. We brought them in and said, what would you do different? And they're like, oh, the first thing I do is I'd get rid of the bar outside. I'm like, that's my favorite thing about the whole restaurant, like the bar and the patio.
Yeah.
And they're like, the bar was such a pain in the ass because your bar's there. If people go outside, they sit at the bar. If you're Monday at lunch and you can't afford to have 2 or 3 bartenders, it only pisses everybody off. And I'm like, man, you're right. Like,
valid point.
Maybe I like the bar, I like the swings, I like all that stuff, but maybe that's not the right thing. I don't want to go in planning on being slow, but we, it worked for me at Cochon when I listened to what they said. So we just kind of listened to what they said. We took the bar out. Well, now we had a spot to put our little feature wall for photos and everything. And just that combination of working with DNA and X Design, and then them knowing what like our vision was, because we just stood out in that patio and said, this is what it's about. It's about these oak trees. And we just said, this looks like Louisiana. This is what Louisiana looks like right here in the patio. So that's kind of where the name SoLou came from, because it's South Louisiana. And, so we did SoLou, and then, well, the food's going to be South Louisiana, but we wanted it to be comfort food. So it's Louisiana-inspired comfort food with a twist. And then we just did some simple demographics information, and we're like, to me, it was a new concept, because the data told us we were going to be mostly women and young women. And that had not been my experience. The Ruth's Chris and Rufino's and even my family's restaurants, they all were geared towards men, and generally older, upscale men. And that's what has always been successful in Baton Rouge. And the data is telling us something different. Like, this is who your avatar is going to be. And I'm like, man, can we do that? And I see like one of your sponsors, that's who we look to. We're like, oh, well, Building 5, they kind of do that. That's sort of their market. And we looked at like Bistro Byron's, and like, that's kind of their market too. Like, maybe this'll work. So taking a page from Kathleen, I got all these big giant sticky notes, and I went to my house, and my wife loves this, but on our big picture windows overlooking the backyard, I put all these sticky notes up, and I started to conceptualize what comfort food looked like. So we just write down all the things that were comfort food, and then we'd say, well, how do we make this Louisiana, and what do we do? And so I'm writing these things up, and my daughter would just walk by, and we had a vision board, so we knew a couple of the elements. So early on, somebody came up with these green velvet bar stools, and like, I love chicken wings, and I think chicken wings are comfort food, and we can make Louisiana style. And my daughter would just be like, Dad, you cannot eat chicken wings on a green velvet bar stool. I'm like, are you stupid? Like, that doesn't. So like, we scratched.
For her, it's like a duh. You can't do that.
We scratched chicken wings off, and I had this idea on there for this cauliflower dish, but on my list, it was far down the list, about to fall off. And she would come in, and she's like, oh my God, I would so get this Zydeco cauliflower every time I came in. I'm like, you get cauliflower as an appetizer? Like, that's just not something I would, like, I'm going to get seafood of some sort as an appetizer. And, she's just like, oh yeah. And all her friends, when they would come over and they'd see all my notes, and they'd be like, oh my God, that sounds so good. And I'm like, well, this is the avatar. Like, I can't make food that appeals to me. I need to make food that appeals to them. And when I was doing the salads, she's like, Dad, your salads sounds like an old man did these. You've got Caesar salad, add shrimp and chicken, and, Sensation salad, add shrimp and chicken. Like, that's not how we eat. And I'm like, well, tell me, what, if you were going to eat a salad? She's like, I don't know, let's spinach maybe, and I want some shrimp and maybe mangoes. And she started listing some things, and I just wrote them down. And so that's on the menu. That's called cat salad, because I just wrote down what she said, and it's like our most popular salad. So, it was this great exercise for me to, one, trust in the data and to really get out of my comfort zone and try things that I didn't know and didn't know if it would work.
Patty G Show is proudly brought to you by Mimosa Handcrafted Jewelry. Mimosa Handcrafted Jewelry is a local business right here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They create handcrafted jewelry for everyday use, that special occasion, whatever it may be. Gentlemen, they've got amazing jewelry both for male and female. Everyone is their audience. You know, after years of experimenting with everything from ceramic jewelry, glass beads, and enamel, they've settled in on the ancient art of lost wax casting. Is their main form of creating their work. They cast everything in bronze, sterling silver, and 14 karat gold. Every step of the way is done here right in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Proud sponsors of the Patty G Show. Mimosa Handcrafted Jewelers. Get out there and tell them that Patty G sent you, and they're going to take great care of you on your next order.
And so we are able to somehow get the restaurant open, and we get it open, and you know, the first week or two, and my wife's there every day with me, and she's like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, the avatar you talked about, look at the restaurant. And then it was, I like to say that there's two kinds of restaurant problems. You have slow restaurant problems and you have busy restaurant problems. I'll take busy restaurant problems all day because you can fix those. You can work with those. When you're slow, those problems really hard to overcome. And so we had done all this modeling, you know, financial modeling for the restaurant, and I never in a million years thought the restaurant could do what it did when we opened. And so we were not prepared. Even the staff I had hired to do those kind of numbers, it takes like a different kind of staff. It's really much more about delegating. It's really that kind of like executive chef. And all the chefs now that I've been hiring were all what I'm going to call the regular chefs, the working chefs, the chefs that go in and are on the line and doing the stuff. Well, when you get to that level of sales, you can't do that. It just takes a completely different skill set. So, you know, it's almost like you're trying to fix an airplane while it's flying. So you've got this restaurant, it's blowing and going, and we need the money, you know. So now we've got to kind of adjust. So it was everybody pull through, everybody just the whole team believed in us, believed in what we were doing, and kind of fought through it to get there. But it's just been great. And now when we look to the future, we know SoLou is really our growth vehicle. It's the one that people seem to want to invest in. We think it has legs. So we have this growth strategy that we call 10-10-10. We want to do 10 SoLous in 10 years along the I-10 corridor.
Okay.
So we want to go from like Houston to Jacksonville, but grow concentrically out of Baton Rouge. So, and much like some of the other companies I talked about, like Raising Cane's kind of grew that way, Walk-Ons grew that way, Rotolo's grew that way. So we're going to try to follow in the footsteps of some of those great Baton Rouge restaurants and sort of grow that way outside of Baton Rouge.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen it time and time again. Why change what actually works?
Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, if these people have gone before you and like created this wheel, and it's like, hey, Peter, here's what we've done. Mm-hmm. Just figure out how to apply it to your concept. And your avatar for SoLou is so right. It's always my mother-in-law's first restaurant to go to. My wife always goes there with her friends. That and you're building 5. Mm-hmm. So it's like you never think about it, because when I go there, I'm like, oh, it's a good restaurant. I enjoy it and everything, mm-hmm. but it's never, you know, it's never that, well, what type of clientele do they have until you're there and like, oh, this makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, but the food's not specifically for them. It's
right.
just, it may skew that way mm-hmm. if you were to take a bigger glance at it.
And I think people get the whole avatar thing wrong sometimes because they think we're excluding everyone else. And that's not the way I look at it at all. It's just that your restaurant has to be about something, so you got to find what that is and then be that. That's what makes you like authentic. That's where I think restaurants that do well, what makes them do well is because you know what you're getting, you know what to expect. But we have businessmen come in and have business meetings there. We're not excluding them.
Right.
But when we have to make a decision, we always go back to, does it make sense? Is this what we're about? Because otherwise you get confused. And we get brand confusion sometimes. I think like the Portobello's concept, we have to tweak that brand a little bit because we're not, it's hard to nail down exactly what we're trying to do. I think we're trying to do too much for too many people, and then it gets confusing.
Right. And then it also gets muddied. You don't know, you stand for everything, but you stand for nothing.
Exactly.
And then you're at this point where people come in and they're like, they start asking themselves, what really are you? Kathleen kind of forced you and Ruffin to really nail down, what are you exactly? Put it into words and figure out exactly what your brand does. And what I think has kind of pushed y'all's success so much is the fact that you go and you ask those questions of past people that were there. What would you do different? You oftentimes, if a restaurant closes down, you have a new concept come in, they come in with all these fresh ideas and they just want to push their ideas and they're going to say, no, I've got the vision for this. It's going to be what we're going to be. And then you see them teeter away in about a year or 2 years. Whereas y'all come in and say, if you had to do it all over, what would you do different? We'll just apply our model and our actual branding to that, but make the operations and the setup what you would have changed.
Yeah. I like to think, for me, it comes from this sense of humility, because I know I don't know it all. I know I'm constantly learning. And so like when I tell the story about my daughter helping with the menu, I always get this crazy reaction like, I mean, you're this famous chef and you've done all this stuff and you're letting your teenage daughter tell you? I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like, I can learn something from anybody. Why am I, because that's what people come, well, you're the expert. I'm like, God, I wish you really knew the truth, because no, I'm still trying to figure it out.
I think there is something to be said for being an expert from listening to everybody that's kind of walking around saying, oh, this idea. It's not this internal manifestation of becoming an expert. And being an expert is being able to listen to all this input, take all that data, figure out what's being said, and then apply it within your own way. It's not saying, oh, well, if I didn't think of the salad, I'm not going to serve the salad.
Right.
At the end of the day, you want people to purchase your dishes, and they're only going to purchase them if they feel like, oh, I like how this sounds, I like how this is, but they're also going to want to say, well, I'm not going to eat just your plain Caesar with chicken on it. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here for that mango dish.
Right.
I want that spinach side of things. And it's listening to that input has ultimately, the proof's in the pudding when you look at SoLou. It's like, that was born out of those things. So when you say you had your daughter telling your ideas, I'm like, that's genius. Like, absolutely. Listen to what your potential customer would want.
Right. Yeah, because it's not about you. And TJ used to tell me that all the time. He's one of the ones who drove that into me. Restaurants are not about you. He's like, one day, if you make a whole bunch of money, then you open this little bitty place and you serve just what you want to serve. But otherwise, it's about the guest. And I like to think we take it even further, because it's like, it's the need you're filling. And I always say, like, people aren't going to our kind of restaurants because if they don't eat, they're going to die. Right. They're going there for the feeling. So like at Ruffino's, we started to get it. And the first iteration of it was that we called it Every Night's a Memory, because we're trying to figure out like who we were. And I'm like, we're not selling food and wine. Like, that's not what people are coming here for. And we got to get over ourselves and we got to figure why they're really coming. And so I'm having this conversation with Ruffin and TJ, and we're at the table and we put all those pictures up of our guests all over the wall. And I'm like, look at all these people. Yeah, they're our friends and they're coming here, but like, they're coming, all these pictures represent memories of what they're doing here at the restaurant. And they come here for like special occasions. And sometimes the special occasion is just because it's Tuesday and I haven't seen my family and we're going to take this time to get together. And so over time that evolved into like celebrate life, because we started to look at why do people come here. So we knew we'd do a ton of birthdays and a ton of anniversaries and for promotions, you know, and engagements and all those things. But then it was also, it can just be a Tuesday. Like that's okay too. And so instead of celebrating all these things, it's like, hey, we're celebrating life. Like it can be anything. But then once you hone in on that, we're like, well, how do we make birthdays more special? How do we make anniversaries more special? If we're celebrating, well, let's go all the way and do it. And same thing with my companies now. So like with Phil's, so if, you know, with Kathleen, we came up with this word, passion for Rufino's. I would say it fills the words family, but with a PH. Yeah, family. Because that's what we are. That's how we try to treat everybody. There's a lot of family that works there, you know, but everybody there gets treated like family. I mean, they have servers who have been with them 30 years. Like that's family. And that's family that you get to choose, you know, not that you're stuck with. And so that's like their word. But what I, you know, tell Anthony and tell the team all the time is, do you know when we've really succeeded? Like what success looks like? When somebody comes in and says, Anthony, Gus would be so proud of you. Like, because that's our why. We're honoring Gus there. And that's what we're doing. So it's not me coming in and changing the menu and raising the prices and doing that. Whatever we do, it's honoring Gus. Would Gus like this? Is this a representation of him? And that's what Phil's is. And I think on the other side, so we call that company Making Raving Fans. It's one of my favorite books. In fact, Jerry DiNardo was the one who gave me that book the first time. And when I was sitting down talking to Kiva, I'm like, why do you do it? Like nobody does the restaurant because they think they're going to make money. Right. There are way easier ways to make money than to be in a restaurant. But most people come from it with this servant's heart. And we all have that. All the people in the restaurant. I mean, when you go to any charity event, you're going to see a ton of restaurants all doing it for free. They have a servant's heart. That's why they're doing it. And, you know, Kiva told the story about his kids, and he's like, I would just tell my kids every day, hey, try to make somebody's day. And I'm like, that's such a noble thing. And that's what we do in the restaurant. So it's like we're making someone's day every day, because that's why people go to a restaurant, especially a little bit nicer restaurant. If it's fast food, it could very easily be for convenience. But if you're going to go into a restaurant, you're going to drive past 20 other restaurants and go find a place to park and go in and wait in line, and like you want to get something else, and we want your day made, and we can do that in a number of ways. But generally it's just caring about you. Why are you really here?
Thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Lake Men's Health Center with Our Lady of the Lake Physicians Group. Guys, I know it's tough to get out and go to the doctor. I know it's challenging to find time in our busy days, but I promise you, signing up to be a part of this group with Dr. Curtis Chastain and Dr. Tyler Boudreau, you won't regret it for several reasons, but most of those being the fact of the time it saves, where you're able to get in on the same day, get that appointment done, and spend that time you need to talk with them about what your health goals and concerns are, as well as ensuring that the financial investments you have, you will be able to live out and see those come to fruition. So if you're an investing guy, you know all about and planning for the future and investing in the future. There's no other more important thing to invest in than your health. Make sure you go check them out, Our Lady of the Lake Physicians Group Men's Health Center, and tell them Patty G sent you.
And it became really clear to me with something we did at Rufino's one time. I had a server who had left, who had gone on vacation, and he'd come back, and he couldn't wait to tell me the story about a restaurant he ate in Dallas that they wrote a message on the dessert plate. And the messages were just kind of random, like, oh, you're going to love this. Have a great day. You know, those kind of things. And I had always preached the raving fan concept. And I'm like, they created a raving fan. And part of what makes a raving fan is it's usually free or really inexpensive to do it, but it's that they cared for you, and it's like the way they make you feel. So he's like, I know the chef from the restaurant you went to. I know the food had to be great, but all you're talking about is the 5 cents of chocolate they put on the plate to write the message. And I said, just think if we did that here. Just, you know, think about it. And one of the servers another server was standing there and listening. And she decided that night she was going to do that. And so I just love this story. So her first table, it's this older couple who's celebrating an anniversary, and they can't remember, is it our like 35th wedding anniversary or our 37th wedding anniversary? And so she gets 2 anniversary desserts, which she was worried I'd be concerned about, you know, doubling up on the free desserts. But she wrote like happy 35th anniversary and happy 37th anniversary. And they just thought it was the greatest thing. And they had to come tell us and write on the comment card how wonderful the restaurant is. And then she had another table. It was supposed to be a 6-top. And it was 3 couples celebrating different anniversaries. Except between the time they made the reservation and the night of the reservation, one of the couples split up.
Oh, no.
And so when it came time to do the plates, you know, it was like happy 5th anniversary, happy 8th anniversary, and then enjoy your freedom. And the table, you know, they wanted to see the owner. So they, you know, for the complaints, I was the complaint department. So they called me out of the kitchen. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to...
This went bad fast.
What am I facing? And they're just like... You know, they tell me the story about what happened, and they're like, and look at what your server did. It gave my friend, like, we had to beg them to come out with us. They didn't want to be the third wheel, and they just wanted to stay home and cry. But it gave them a new outlook. Enjoy your freedom.
Wow.
And then she went, like, by the hostess stand, and at Rufino's, both of the restrooms are right there. She just stood there and was telling everyone, oh, my God, this is my favorite restaurant. These people are so great. And I'm like, you want to know what a raving fan is? That's a raving fan. And then the last time she did that night, it was for a local radio personality, Bill Profita. Now, she happened to be personal friends with Bill Profita in addition to serving them that night, but it was like Bill's birthday. And so on his dessert plate, she wrote, see you soon, God. Now, if you would have done that to somebody you didn't know, they could have been offended.
Right.
But she knew him. He loved it so much that on Monday morning, he called me, and I got like 30 minutes on his radio show just about how great the restaurant is and the team we've put together and all that. And I'm like, that's what raving fan hospitality is about. What did it cost us? A few cents in chocolate. But what it really did was if you had to write a personalized message on the plate, you had to pay attention to the guests to find out why they were really there. And so we started doing this thing. Well, over time, people got artistic and they start drawing pictures and those kind of things. In fact, Rufino's has the dessert plates have their own Facebook page still.
Really?
And, but eventually I realized we lost the spirit of what it was. And so you would just see people like, oh, they just make us do these dessert plates. So they're just writing happy birthday or happy anniversary. And so I go into a couple of shift meetings and I retell the story and I'm, you know, and they don't get it. So then like angry chef has to come out and, you know, I see like 6 dessert plates on our table where we do the plates and they all are just super generic. So I lose my mind. I like throw all the dessert plates in the garbage can, make all the plates break. And I'm losing my mind because we lost the magic of it. So then everybody had to go start paying attention because now this maniac was going to make sure that your plate was customized. And in less than a week, we started to get the real stories. As soon as I started to practice finding out what people were there for, and they were so touching. So we'd have like a big shift meeting on Fridays and Saturdays, and then I'd say, okay, tell me about some plates this week. And they're like, I had a family who came in, and when I tried to find out like why they were really here, it's because their mom had just been diagnosed with cancer and they think this could be the last birthday with mom. And I'm like, we're not just serving food. We're not just, I'm giving you a chicken parm and you give me $20. This is this memory that, and if we screw this up, there's no do-over. Like, so it translated to every person in the restaurant. If the plate's dirty, if the dishwasher didn't do a good job, if we get the steak temperature wrong, if the food comes out cold, if we screw this up, this is what they chose us to come here because this might be mom's last birthday. And all of a sudden it clicked and everybody got it. Like, we're really doing important work. We're not, most people think, yeah, we're just a restaurant. We're just slinging some food. But we're like, no, this is important. And then other people are like, oh, their son's being deployed. And, like, people were celebrating all these super important things with us. And it gave the staff this different perspective, and it changed things. And that's what we try to do in our restaurants. We don't succeed every day. It's hard to get this many team members all rowing in the same direction to realize this is really what we're about. Because at the same time, you have to be a business. You have to watch your costs. You have to try to be fully staffed, which is almost impossible right now. You have to do these other things, but we never want them to lose sight that what we're doing is really important. This is why people are coming. Restaurants are where people go to celebrate everything in their lives. And we owe that to them. And it's where the culture comes from. Whenever people talk about Louisiana culture, it always revolves around the food.
Yeah.
Whether it's tailgating or eating at restaurants or cooking jambalaya or crawfish boil, it's food. And that's what we have in South Louisiana, is we bring people together through food. And so that's why it's so important to me. That's why I'm in the business. That's why we do what we do is, to do that for people in our community.
Yeah, and it shows when you're there at the restaurants, getting that experience. You're not just getting a dinner served to you or a lunch served to you by a server. You're actually getting an experience. And it's a lot more back and forth between the servers and the people in the restaurant that really shows, wow, this is not just a place to come grab a quick bite. It's a place to come and celebrate, place to come and enjoy every meal that we've got. And as Louisiana people, we're foodies, or we claim to be foodies. Yeah. So we like to have good food with good company and in a place that understands it. So I love what y'all have going at the concepts that y'all are doing around the city. And I'm excited to see that growth along the I-10 corridor. McClavy's Limited, a proud sponsor of the Patty G Show, has been serving the Baton Rouge area proudly for 40-plus years. Gentlemen and ladies, if you're shopping for your man, there is no other place in the Baton Rouge area to get your clothing, whether it's game day needs, everyday needs, business attire, formal attire, whatever you want. Go over there, see Frank and Ashley. It's a father-daughter duo. They do incredible things in their store. They will outfit you from as simply a shirt that you need for one evening or all the way to a full wardrobe overhaul. They're going to take care of you every step of the way, and be sure and let them know that Patty G Show sent you. So as we kind of start to wrap up the show, we have a set list of questions we ask every guest.
Okay.
So the first one is, what is something you did as a kid you wish you could still do today?
Talk to my grandfather. Especially the grandfather that was on my mom's side of the family. The grandfather on my dad's side was a chef and restaurateur, but this one really like taught me about food with a story. And one thing I do sometimes for people who are coming to work for me, especially when I was a chef and in the kitchen, I always wanted to ask people like what their best food memory was. And when I first started it, I expected it to be, oh, well, I had the chef's tasting menu, here in Vegas or, at the French Laundry. It was never, ever that. It was, oh, it's my aunt's blueberry pie, or, it was some food thing. And for me, it was about tomatoes. And like one of my earliest memories is my grandfather taking me out in the garden, and he had a little fence around it. He unlocked it, and we go in there, and he picks this ripe Creole tomato off the vine, and he pulls his pocket knife out, and he slices a couple of slices, and he has a salt shaker, and he put a little salt, and we ate that tomato in the garden, and that memory is so etched in my mind. And every year I like to drive down to Chalmette and buy Creole tomatoes from Mr. Gallo, who grew them for my grandfather and my dad. And my kids think it's so corny, but I like to have them come and we stand by the sink, and I pull my grandfather's knife out and I cut that slice of tomato. We use a little bit better salt these days, but and I eat that tomato, and if I close my eyes, I feel like my grandfather's standing there. That memory's so powerful, it like transports you there. And I hope my kids get it one day, because right now they're just like, oh, Dad does this stupid thing with tomatoes. But, that's what it does for me. So if I could do something as a kid, it would be that. Yeah.
And I mean, that memory of food and how it kind of stings and burns in your head and never leaves is always so powerful. You take one bite of a dish and you're like, wow, I'm back at this place doing this with somebody. And that happens to me with smell. Somebody say, smell this. I'm like, that smells like I'm at my grandparents' kitchen table and my grandmother's whipping up pancakes.
That's why food, I think, is so important, because it evokes those super strong memories and those bonds we have with people.
Yeah. And this, just like you kind of repeat it every time you take a bite of something. Oh, you get to relive it. It's one of the few things that you can easily relive just from a dish or just from a drink. So you've done a lot over the years. What are 3 lessons you've kind of learned along the way?
I think one is like to never give up. And I think what I used to say before is that, I'm just not smart enough to know when to quit. But like, I really think it's more about just tenacity. It's not win or lose, it's win or learn. The only time you lose is when you quit. And so you just keep going. And sometimes you just have to push through that uncomfortableness, and success is usually on the other side of it. But most people hit those couple of roadblocks and quit. And I find, especially post-COVID, when I'm mentoring people on my team, they get down a lot. They're perfectionists, and it's just trying to convince them, don't quit, push through. These are supposed to happen every time. Like, I just had a call from a chef last night, calling to like apologize. Like, man, we had a rough night. I'm like, it's restaurant week. Like, that happens. Like, you've never got your ass kicked before. Like, yeah, but like, you're supposed to. You ever hang out with all other chefs? All we do is talk about what our crappy nights were like. It's like battle scars. And like, we all had to just keep going. The ones who don't become great, they quit. It got hard and they gave up. So I think it's not quitting. Also, we touched on this, but it's like the humility. After I graduated from LSU and I was in the kitchen, I really wanted to go to like the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, CIA. And they offered week-long classes. And my dad told me, I don't want you to go and learn to chop an onion at the CIA. We're not going to pay that kind of money. Make sure you have a good base of knowledge and then go there. And so I got this base of knowledge. And because I knew how to cook everything on our menu, I thought I was like a big deal and knew all this stuff. And I go up to the CIA and learn I know absolutely nothing. And it was a real eye-opener for me. And I think that's when this constant quest for knowledge took root, that there's so much out there to learn. You can learn from anybody in any situation. So I think that's when that really took root. And I see so many people who come into a situation where they're kind of cocky and they feel like they know it or they've been successful. But like every successful person I know has this humility and is always looking to learn. And just like a couple in the restaurant business, Brandon Landry's one. Brandon Landry used to be a server for us at Ruffino's before they opened. And so here's a guy who's had all this success, right? Every time I see him, he's always trying to learn something. And I'm just like, you should be teaching this, not learning it. But that's who he is. And then there's a guy in Chicago named Richard Melman. And I think he's, in my opinion, he's probably the best restaurateur in the country. All the big awards are named after him. And I was fortunate enough to get to know him and meet him and spend just a little bit of time with him. And same thing. Here's a guy who like invented the salad bar and invented all these things and it's just changed the restaurant industry. And he's trying to learn something from me. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm just a knucklehead. Like, what could you learn from me? And it's like, it just reinforces that those people who are truly great are always learning, you know? And then I think the last thing is it's really all about the relationships. And, you know, it's important. And I'm a doer and I want to go do it. But I realize my time is best spent like just talking to people, developing those relationships, telling people I believe in them, that they can do it, even when they screw up. You know, and that was part of my conversation last night. I'm going to be so much easier on you when you admit to your mistakes than when you tell me how good you are. Because when you tell me how good you are, I'm going to have to knock you down a few notches because you need that humility that you can always get better, you can always learn. But it's investing in the relationships, and it's in business, it's our relationships with our guests, our team members, our vendors, the community. You know, it's all those stakeholders. It's investing in those relationships. And sometimes I have a tendency to be efficient with people. And so I really work on that to try to remember to slow down and, you know, be present with someone when I'm with them and not, you know, be looking on my phone or trying to do something else or even think about what I'm going to say or when my next meeting's coming. It's like I struggle with that, but I know it's so important.
I think as entrepreneurs and restaurateurs, we all have that situation we're dealing with where we're with somebody and we're trying to be as focused and engaged as possible, but there's just so much in the back of our head that's running through that's like, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that. But when you have that ability to really just hone in on who you're with, you realize, wow, that was, you finish whatever interaction it was and you're like, that was powerful. Like that was really, really good. And you're not just halfway there and halfway out. And you can really enjoy those moments that you have with them.
Yeah. And that's where the deep relationships come from. And it's not being efficient. And as a businessman, I'm always trying to do more, but I've learned I get more if I slow down.
Try telling that to somebody trying to work through their line in the night when it's slammed. It's like you just got to slow it down, really focus on what you're doing, and not just speed through over to the next table. Because they'll see if you're spending 15 minutes with that table, they're going to get initially annoyed, but then when you come and spend 15 minutes with them, you're like, oh, that was really nice.
Yeah.
Really got that attention that I was hoping for. So absolutely. Love all three of those. Thank you to Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge for making this show possible. Nick Pentis is a past guest. We love having him on. Listening to him talk about the culture they have over at Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge is really an incredible thing to hear. How they treat not only their employees, but every customer that walks through the door. You are more than just a number to them. They're going to give you that white glove concierge service every step of the way. They're going to make you feel like family and take what can be a stressful time in people's life, shopping for a car. They're going to make it so enjoyable and so pleasurable. You're going to want to go back there time and time again for every new vehicle. Thank you so very much for Mercedes-Benz of making this show possible. Now, what is something you love about Baton Rouge?
So because I come from New Orleans, people are like, man, I can't believe you left New Orleans to come to Baton Rouge. And I'm like, I absolutely love Baton Rouge. It's like a big small town, and I just think that's great. It's not just Baton Rouge. I think it's like the people in the South, or the people of Louisiana especially, but that joy of life and food and family. And my dad had moved after Katrina. He had moved for a little while to Florida, and he said like he hated it. Now, Florida's nice and it's a good place to do business, but it's almost like nobody's from Florida. Everybody's from somewhere else that moved to Florida. And so in Louisiana, we can find a connection with someone with just 2 or 3 questions.
Yeah.
And then we feel like we're bonded because, oh, you went to this high school, so-and-so. Well, if they're friends, then we can be friends. And we find that connection so easily. And that's probably the biggest thing I love about Baton Rouge is, it's that.
Yeah. You're no more than 2, 3, or 4 links from somebody, and they could be total strangers. And I experienced that yesterday at the Rotary Club. I'm sitting there next to somebody I've never met. They knew of me and they knew of the show. And they're like, you had a good buddy of mine on way back when, in the early days of your show. I was like, I sure did. I was like, we're one connection away.
Right.
And we know each other, and you're a total stranger to me. I have no idea who you are. And then we just bonded over lunch and got to meet the person to my right, same situation. I'm like, this is crazy how this happens, and it's not abnormal. It's like the expected. If you sit down at dinner, the person at the table across from you, you probably have very similar connections, and you don't even know their name.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy that is 100% true. It's a little big town, and it's like we're big, and you feel like it's a city and a big place at some point, but then you go to the grocery store and you see 3 or 4 neighbors down the street, you recognize the person. You're like, this is great.
Yeah, Ruffin was masterful at it, and he did it through sports. So he could be in the restaurant and meet somebody from another state, but because he knew where like every athlete was from, he's like, oh, so-and-so, especially like if they're from a small town, because I didn't have that small town mentality growing up, but he's like, hey, in these small towns, Friday night high school football is a big deal. Everybody goes. So if you played football in high school, like everybody's going to know you and know your family. And he could just make those connections with people instantly through some football reference. He knew somebody from that town or that area, and they connected. And so I do it over restaurants. So if somebody's from out of town, oh, have you ever been to so-and-so? And then you make that connection. But another cool thing about Baton Rouge is like the restaurant community here, we're all friends.
Yeah.
Even though we're really like competitors, we're friends. So like Brumby comes into our places, I go into his place. Like it's not it's not that super competitive spirit. And even I work with Juban's. We run Juban's restaurant. And especially back in the day, it was like, oh, well, Juban's and Ruffino's, they should be like arch enemies. But we've always been we've always been friends, and you can just pick up the phone and call anybody. Hey, can I borrow this? Can I do that? People are always calling me. Hey, what are you doing about such and such? And, you know, we all help each other, and that's those relationships.
Yeah, and that's part of that continuing desire to learn, even from those you may be competing with. You know, if Brumby comes into your restaurant and sees something that he likes or didn't think about, like, oh, let me take that back to Building 5, and same thing for you. If you go to Building 5 and you're like, oh, that's a unique little spin, I'm going to try to see if that maybe can work within our model. It's that always wanting to learn and then always wanting to help. Within Baton Rouge, the restaurant owners, like you said, if there isn't a charity function, they're there first and foremost, and they're doing everything they can to help, which is really powerful and speaks volumes for the hospitality industry here in Baton Rouge as a whole. So for the final question, what can I do to help you?
Unless you want to invest in some restaurants.
I've got no money.
Yeah, me too. So, you know, I think I would just tell you or tell people, like, be a good consumer. Like, go to restaurants, support local restaurants, and we're open to feedback. I mean, none of us like the Karens that come in and want to yell at us, but like, we're all trying to do a good job. We're all trying to make somebody's day. We're all trying to help somebody celebrate life, you know, whatever that is and looks like. And if we can do it better, you can let us know, because we're looking for that. We want to know how to be better. But you know, whenever somebody's like, man, how do I get a reservation there? I'm like, become a regular customer. So find a place that you like and become a regular there. Regulars get anything they want. You know, and that's how you do it, is become a regular. So that's kind of what I would tell you. Become a regular.
Yeah, and I think that's any restaurant, just being a regular. You're not saying to be a regular at every restaurant.
Right.
Find a place you and your family, you and your friends enjoy. And absolutely, because then when you come in, every server there has probably sat you and waited on you, and they can tell you, oh, he's going to get this dish. But you got to tweak it a little bit because he likes it a little bit different than how we serve it. And they're always more accommodating, which is proof of the more you go, the more recognizable you become, and the more they are like your family. You know, everybody here is family, but there's some cousins you only see at Christmas time, and there's cousins you see every weekend. You treat them all as often as you see them a little bit differently. Yeah. And so the same things within restaurants, being a regular.
It's just so funny you said that, because that is exactly what I preach. I'm like, there's 2 rules to a regular guest. One, you know their name, or you call them something. Like, we had one lady, like, oh, it's the catfish lady. Like, you knew that, but then they customize something on the menu just a little bit. Just like you said, like, everybody, like, we can go through all our regulars and start to tell you, oh, well, no, this is how they like this, and this is what they do here. It's that something that's customized, but that makes them feel like, well, this is my restaurant. I go in and get it the way I want it. And we have to correct new cooks because they come in. Why don't people just eat it the way that we designed it? You know, because this is what makes them a regular. So that's why I'm always preaching that. Don't get mad when somebody wants to adjust it a little bit, because this is what makes them come in all the time. It's because we will adjust it.
And I've done that. So I used to work at Roberto's, and I would always order crawfish etouffee over fries instead of rice. And I would get that every time I went in there. And he was like, why do you want that? I'm like, because I always want fries, but I want the etouffee, and just swap out the rice for fries. And it's something simple, and it's not complicated, but they knew as soon as I came in, okay, you want this? And then we started getting it as appetizers. And like, my family would say, yeah, we want Patrick's fries. That's what we want as an appetizer. And it became a thing. So you're absolutely right. The more you frequent, the more they're going to say, okay, well, absolutely, we're gonna get that, because that's what you get here every time. You're the catfish person, we're going to get you your catfish. And that's, my dad had an employee that would go there because it was right where they were working, and they called him Catfish. And every time he walked in, that's all he would order was a catfish platter. So he got named Catfish Platter, And the bartender, he would walk in and say, "What's up, catfish platter?" Like it became an actual thing, not just a back of house behind the scenes name. It was no, we're that close because you're here that often, and you just don't get that if you're a one-time customer. You would love to, but it's like it's just impossible to get that level of service if you only go one time. And the more you frequent, the more it's that's catfish platter. So I love that, man. Now, before I did have one other question that I wanted to ask. What are your thoughts on when someone sits down at the table and says, "Tell the chef to cook me whatever they want"?
It's such a loaded question.
And it probably is different per restaurant.
Right. Per restaurant and per chef and per person. So I'm usually going to try to come up, well, what do you like to eat? What do you normally do? But then otherwise, I'm going to default to something that's like kind of our signature dish, the thing that best represents us. Then, this is what I think you should, what you should eat. So we do that, but we're really trying to find that thing, for you. Because people always say, "What's your favorite thing to cook?" Like, it depends. It changes, and sometimes what I may want to cook is just weird because I saw it somewhere. I want to learn about it, So like my answer right now is, it's going to sound weird, but it's like beef cheeks. You don't see them everywhere. They have a terrible yield, so restaurants don't do them. But oh my God, they're so freaking delicious. They're so good. They take a long time, but it's like that's sort of my thing right now. But then it's going to change because, the chef at Juban's, Chris Motto, and we just went to this seminar in New Orleans, and they had one guy who did this pasta making demo, and he used like this 4-foot rolling pin. So I went and got Chris and I each these 4-foot rolling pins. So like that'll probably be the next thing I want to tackle is making, 4-foot long sheets of pasta to do ravioli and different kinds of pasta with it. But that's how it happens is you see something, you get into something, you want to learn more about it. So that's what you cook. But what I eat more than anything is like, and people think it's so boring, but like roasted chicken. It's like sublime when it's done properly. And like you can just tell so much about somebody like that, about how they roast the chicken and the care they put into making sure the skin's crisp, but it's not overcooked and juicy and seasoned right. And
it becomes an art form. Yeah. Well, thank you, Peter, so much for coming on the show, man.
Appreciate
your time. This was fantastic to hear all the stories and everything that you've done along the years, and I'm excited to see that continued growth here and beyond Baton Rouge.
Well, great. Well, thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody else, for listening or watching, whatever platform you're consuming the show on. I very much appreciate everything that y'all do to help this show, whether it's sharing, liking, subscribing, all those different things. Thank you so very much. Peter's got quite a resume of restaurants. We're going to have all of them tagged in the show notes so you can go and experience each one of those within the city and let them know that you heard about them on the show and give them your feedback. They want that feedback of what your experience was like and what you're celebrating and everything. So be sure to go out there and become a regular. So thank y'all so very much. And thank you to the amazing folks that bring you the show each and every week. We couldn't do it without them. We've got a little bit more about them right now. Thank you so very much to Currency Bank, a proud sponsor of the Patty G Show. If you're looking for a business bank that fosters on 3 core values, relationships, service, and technology, Currency Bank is the place for you. They pride themselves on convenient, accessible, and secure online banking resources where you can manage your account balances, initiate transfers, enroll with e-statements, and more via their online portal. Between the relationships, the service, and the technology, they are going to be that partner with your business every step of the way, regardless of what you need. Currency Bank is the bank for business owners.
Don't want a complication.